Let's move on to the next problem where we have that we bought a pair of shoes and they were on discount for 25% and I paid 50 euros. And it asks what the original price was, what the total price was, we could say. Now, what does this mean that they were on discount for 25%? That means that I did not pay 25% of the original price, of the total price. That's what I didn't have to pay. So how much did I have to pay? I had to pay the rest of the percentage, so the difference between 125, which is 75. So I paid 75% of the total price. See, there was an extra step in that problem that you had to think of. You shouldn't have taken this as the 25% is the 50. You need to think that, oh, 50 is what I did pay, 25% is what I didn't pay. So what percentage did I pay? I paid 75%, and that's 50. So I know the percentage, and I know the part of the total price that I did pay, 50 euros. And I want to find what the total price is. So what I would have paid without the uh, discount. And I find that by doing 50 over 75. If you remember the shape that we made last time, when I know the part and I know the percentage, take the part over the percentage and we times it by 100. So what I would get is 5,000 divided by 75 over 75. You can do this vertically, this division, and what you would get is 66.66666. So it's a repeating number. So I can just put this above the 6 to show that it repeats. So it would have actually cost, let's say, 66 euros and 66 cents. That would be the total price. Next up, we have a problem where 30% of the children of a school, which has 250 children, stay at school after, basically after the lessons end. So how many kids is that? 30% of 250. So we have the percentage and we have the total number of students, and we want to find how many kids that is. So 30% of 250. So what I do here is I say 30. Again, if you remember the shape that we talked about last time, what I'm missing here is the part. I have the percentage, I have the total, and I want to find the part. So I have 30 over 100 times 250. Now let's think about this. 30 times 250. If I said 3 times 25, I'd get 75. And then just put the 2 zeros at the end. So that's not a 0. So that's 7,500 over 100. Which would make, if I did 7,500 divided by 100, that would give me 75. So 75 students stay at the school after the lessons end. Next up, we have that out of 500 nuts, 10% is spoiled. How many are still edible? Basically, how many can I still eat? Okay, so again, this is a trick question because it gives you what percentage is spoiled. That means that you can't eat them. And it asks you how many you can eat. So if you can't eat 10%, that means that you can eat the rest. Basically the difference between 100% and 10%, which would be 90%. Since you can't eat 10%, you can eat 90% because that's how much is left out of the 100%. 90% of 500. So here I know the percentage that we can eat, and we know the total, 500. So I want 90% of 500. So again, I'm going to say 90 over 100 times 500. 90 times 500. Well, 9 times 5 makes 45, and then I'm going to put 3 more zeros after that because 1, 2, 3 zeros. That's too big. So what I get is 45,000 over 100, which means if I did 45,000, I can just cross out the zeros here. And what I'm left with is 450. 450. Next up, we see a problem where a school has 160 students and every day 5% is absent. It doesn't have to be the same 5%, but that doesn't matter. And it asks how many kids is that. So how many kids is 5% of 160? So here, I want to find 5% of 160. So I do 5 over 100 times 160. 5 times 16 would make 80. And I'm going to put another 0 after that. So it makes 800 over 100. By the way, the multiplications, I'm doing them a little faster. If you want to do them somewhere on the back of the sheet or on a piece of paper, you could do that too. If you want to do them vertically, you could do that too. It's perfectly fine. So here I'm going to cross out these zeros, 2 on top, 2 on the bottom, and what I'm left with is 8. So 8 kids are absent every day. Next problem. We have a library that has 2,500 books, and 25% is written by foreign authors. That means people from another country. And it asks how many books are written by foreign authors. So we want 25% of 2,500. So again, the same method, 25 over 100. I'm using this same method again because I know the percentage, I know the total, and I want to find the part. So we do the percentage over 100 times the total. Okay, now we have to do 25 times 25, which is 25 times 25. Let's think. That's 625. And we're going to put 2 more zeros after that. So what I get is 62,500 over 100. Cross out the zeros. And we get 625. Well, that's not 6. 625. So out of the 2,500 books in the library, 625 are written by foreign writers, people from another country. Next problem. We have a problem where we bought 300 juice boxes for a party, and 36 of them are peach flavored. And it asks what percentage is the peach flavored. If you remember, here what we have is the total, and we have the part, and we want to find the percentage. It even asks you what percentage. So when we're looking for the percentage, we take the part, so 36, and we take the total, 300, divide the two, and then times whatever we find by 100. Okay, so here I can do 36 times 100 makes 3,600. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Over 300. Cross out the zeros. And I'm left with 36 over 3. 36 divided by 3 would give me 12. So 12% of the juices are, that's my answer, 12%. Check your answers. Make sure you got them correctly. Pause the video if you have to, and then come back so that we can continue to the next worksheet. Okay, let's go to the next worksheet. This one basically asks us to write percentage in fraction form and decimal form, or basically gives us one of the parts and asks us to find the rest. Now, we talked about how to turn percentages into fractions by saying, well, since this is 8%, this is 8 over 100. So how do I turn that into a decimal? Well, we've done this many times in the past where we say that this is like saying 8 divided by 100. 8 divided by 100 would give me 0.08. Next up, we have 0.25. If I wanted to write this as a fraction, this would be 25 over 100. In percentage form, that would be 25%. Next up, this one's a little more difficult because it gives you 4/5, and this isn't a fraction with a denominator of 10, 100, or 1,000, so I can't really turn this into a decimal yet. But what I can do is find its equivalent that has a denominator of 100. Now, what would be the equivalent of this fraction to have a denominator of 100? You have to think, what do I have to multiply 5 by to turn it into 100? I have to multiply it by 20. And since I'm going to multiply the bottom number by 20, I'm going to have to multiply the top number by 20 as well. And 4 times 20 would give me 80. Over 100. I just rewrote this fraction to help us turn it into a decimal with greater ease. 80 over 100. So, well, of course, percentage is easier at this point. 80%. And you might be thinking, why did we want to turn it into a fraction with a denominator of 100? Because that's how we get the percentage form. Percentage form, we've said, is a fraction. It has the denominator of 100. So that's how we wanted it. Okay, so we got 80%. Now for the decimal. If we had 80 divided by 100, what we would get is 0.8. Great. Now, next up. We want to find 5% of these numbers, each of these numbers. Okay, so what you would have to do for each of these, since we know the percentage, You know the total, you want to find the part. You do 5 over 100 times each of these numbers. Okay, so first we would do 200. And the next one we would do 5 over 100 times 500, then 1,000, then 5 over 100 times 1,400, and then 5 over 100 times 1,400, and then 5 over 100 times 1,600. You get the idea. So here we would have 5 over 200, 5 over 100 times 200. This would give me 1,000, 1,000 over 100. So what I would get out of this division, 1,000 divided by 100, is 10. Now, because of a lack of space, you could write this on your on a piece of paper. You could do the calculations and just write the answers here. But because of a lack of space, I'm just going to write the answers here. So I'm going to say that 5% of 500 is 25. If you did this same calculation, but instead of 200, you put in 500, you would have gotten 25. Next up, 5% of 1,000. Let's put in the dot as well. I want to be correct. Is 50. 5% of what's next? 1,400 is. Let's think about this. We would do 5 times 14, which would give us 70. So 700. No, 7,000 over 100. So that would be 70. 5% of 1,800 is 80. And last but not least, 5% of 2,000 is 100. Okay, so these are the answers. Again, I wrote them a little faster due to a lack of space. You know what, actually, let's take this, because right now you can't read it. And we're going to place it correctly. Better. Okay, next up. So here, there's a store, and it changed prices a few times. And basically what it wants us to find is the price of each of the products after the discount. Okay, so here, for example, it says that we have a button-up shirt for 50 euros, and it's on discount for 20%. So we want to find how much it would cost after a discount of 20%. What that means is basically that I'm not going to be paying 20%. So how much will I be paying? I'm going to be paying the rest. Since I'm not going to be paying out of the 100%, I'm not going to be paying 20, I'm going to be paying the rest. So the difference between 100 and 20, which means I would be paying 80%. That's how much I will be paying. I'm writing in red what I will be paying. For these, since I'm not paying 35%, the difference between 100 and 35 would be 65. Again, that's how much I will be paying. Next up, since I'm not paying 50%, I'm going to be paying the other 50%. The difference between 100 and 50 is 50. If you do 100, take away 50, you get 50. Now immediately you might notice that 50% is basically like saying half. So these can be filled out pretty easily, but we'll do these the classical way. So I know the percentage, how much I will be paying, I know how much the total price is, and I want to find the part. I want to find the part that I will be paying in the end. So here I want to find 80% of 50. I want to find 65% of 50, and here 50% of 50. Let's start with this. 80% of 50. So I would do 80 over 100. No, not like this. Yeah, let's move in a little closer. $80 over 100 times 50. So what you get is 4,000 over 100, and this isn't going to fit. So my end price is 40. So I will be paying 40. Next up, we want to find 65% of 50. So 65 over 100 times 50. Okay. Now let's think about this. We'll start by putting a 0. 5 by 5 makes 25. Add the 5, carry the 2. 5 by 6 makes 30, and 2 that I carried over makes 32. So 3,250 over, did I do that correctly? Yeah, over 100. 3,250 divided by 100 would give me 32.5. So I would pay 32.5 euros. Now here, again, we said you could just take the half. If you remember that 50% is half, you could just take the half of 50. But we are going to do this the long way. So 50 over 100 times 50, which would give me 2,500. Over 100, which would give me 25. Which is the half of 50, as we said. Next up, we want to find 80% of 80. So, yeah, we are going to take these and copy them. We're just going to change up the numbers a little bit for each of these. Whoa. Sorry. Okay, let's erase what we don't want. Now the results won't be the same, definitely. The results won't be the same. And this fraction won't be the same. So let's just do this a little bit faster. Okay, so now I want to find 80% of, in this case, 80. In this case, 100. In this case, 150. So we're going to put those numbers in for each of these. Here it's 80. Here it's 100. And here it's 150. And one last time. Okay, there we go. Now that we got that all cleaned up, we can continue. So 80 times 80 would give me 1,600 over 100. Wait, no, sorry, that was a mistake. Sorry. That would give me 6. I did 8 plus 8. 6,400. Sorry about that. Divided by 100. So we get 64. Next up, we have 65 times 80. Okay. Put in the 0, then we have 8 by 5 makes 40. Put another 0, carry 4. 8 by 6 makes 48, and we carried 4, so 52. Again, you can do this multiplication vertically if you want to. So this gives us 52. If I cross out the zeros. Next up, 50 times 80. So that's 40 with 2 zeros. 4,000 over 100. So 40. 80 by 100 over 100. Okay, so here you could, yeah, let's just do this. 8,000 over 100, which would make 80. Now, what I was gonna say is that you could be a little more reasonable with this and just avoid this completely. Why? Because here you want to find 80% of 100. Since what's 80% of 100? Well, 80. Since you're paying 80 out of 100, 80, that's what 80% is, 80 out of 100. Well, the price actually is 100. You don't have to do this. But even if you got to this point where you actually wrote it, what are you saying here? You're basically saying 80 divided by 100 and then times 100. Since these two are opposites, you could have just crossed these two out, and you would have gotten 80. And what you'll see here is with the next two, here we're going to get 65, and here we're going to get 50. Why? Because the price is exactly 100. It's like saying, what's 2% of 100? 2. What's 25% of 100? 25, because it's exactly 100. But we are going to do this the same way that we explained because I don't want you to get confused. So we're going to get 6,500 out of doing 65 times 100. So 6,500 over 100 And this gives me 65. Next up, 50 times 100 will give me 5,000. Over 100, which will give me 50. Okay, next up, we want to find 80% of 150. So we're going to do 80 times 150, which will give me 8 by 15 will give me 120. And with another 2 zeros at the end, so 12,000. This is supposed to be a 0. 12,000 over 100, which I'm going to cross out the 2 zeros, and I'm going to have 120 left over. Next up, we have 65 over 100 times 150 to find 65% over 150. Now, 65 times 15, let's see, this makes 9,750. Right? Over 100. Yeah. Wait a minute. If this was 200, this would be 13,000. No. I need a minute to make sure this multiplication is correct. It is correct. So what I would get out of this is 90. Why did I put 1,000 here? This should be 100. And let's move this a little bit to the left. And what I get out of this is 97.5. Next up, we have 50 over 100 times 150. So 5 times 15 would give me 75. And then I'm going to put 2 more zeros. Over 100. 7,500 over 100 would give me 75. And that's all my solutions. So make sure you got these correctly. And weekend's coming up, so do your homework. And I'll see you guys on Monday. Bye.